First off, I want to apologize for the different starting time, but I've got something else I have to try to get out of here for. Um, Hope everybody had a chance to look at the minutes of the June 17th committee meeting. I make a motion to approve them as written unless there's some changes. Do I get a second? Vinnie, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. We have two presentations today. The first one is a strategy and policy for sustainable employee health insurance fund by Eric.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. I believe you received the draft health policy in your packets today. I'm just going to go through some highlights and what's in there, and then the last page we're going to look at a little bit. But so what you're seeing up there for the first couple pages you've had before. You have a legislative goal, which I think states to consider the economic source. I didn't write that down very effectively, but anyway, I think what your legislative goal is to see if the fund balance can be used as a mechanism to curb increases in our health plan premium. So we'll come back around to that. The first, Connor, you can flip back to the top, but thank you very much. The first couple paragraphs beginning is just a background and purpose of the policy. Why are we doing it? Down in the plan fund balance and the definition, technically, if you look at what's in the balance sheet for the health insurance fund, really there's just cash investments, some minor prepaid assets, and some accounts payable. The accounts payable is recognized every year to look at the 2-month payout of claims. And we're going to talk about that in a second also. So in essence, really what's in the health plan is the cash and investments, and that thus becomes your fund balance. So that's kind of what that talks about. And kind of right there in the bottom of the page, minimum fund balance amount, our recommendation is $3 million. And we're going to look at the calculation for that in a second. A couple of key items after that, right at the very bottom of that page, is that the steering committee, we have a group that meets monthly, county administration, hospital administration, and our GKG consultants. That's our steering committee. What this policy says is we're going to look at this fund balance 2 times a year. We probably talk about it, if not every month, but we talk about it quite regularly, but we will formally look at it twice a year. And I think the next paragraph says that steering committee, actually I think it's line item 3 in there, the steering committee can revise that fund balance, recommended fund balance, based on those 2 times a year reviews. So if the steering committee feels a need, we would recommend a new level and change that level of fund balance. The next section, monitoring the balance and actions, talks about, given where we are in comparison to that minimum, how might that affect our premiums, for example. So if item number 1 says if we're below the minimum, we could use that as we look at our annual health insurance premium discussion to make that a higher amount. Every year as we look at our annual renewal, we get an analysis from the actuarial firm Milliman, and they show us what a conservative premium increase would be, what the middle of the road premium increase would be, and what an aggressive increase would be. If we are below our minimum fund balance, we would need to look at the expected or the middle of the road and add 5% to that. That's what this policy suggests. So this past year, I think the expected or middle of the road was 13%. We were below our minimum. So technically, the policy might have called for us to add 5% to that middle of the road increase. Does that make sense? The next item talks about if we are exceeding the minimum, and what we put in there is by 50% or more. So at $3 million minimum, if we were at 4.5 million, what action would we take in that case? And what we're saying there is we would look at the aggressive annual increase from Milliman's reporting. And then the last item says it in a general year, we would look at increasing our health plan premiums by 3.5%, just to keep pace with inflation, healthcare costs, et cetera. Unfortunately, we've not seen that in a while. 3.5% is pretty low in the healthcare world, but that would be a standard increase based on this policy. So that's the basics of what's in the policy. If you have questions on that, and then again, we will just look at on the last page, kind of the calculation of how we got to that amount. But if there's any questions at this point. Herb?
Eric, on the looking at it twice a year, is that sufficient? Like if we're looking 2 months ahead at the claims and claims are starting to drive up, would it make sense to look at it more than twice a year?
I think that's what the policy says is a formal review. Again, I wouldn't say that our group talks about it every month, but we do, not every month, but we do, I'd say every 2 to 3 months at a minimum. So I think twice a year is formal. We are regularly discussing fund balance in addition to that. And then I think if you look at the calculations, you would see where it really doesn't change that much. What the calculations show the minimum should be doesn't change that much. And when we look at the calculations, if you still aren't thinking about that, bring it up again.
Where do we come up with the $3 million figure? What's the purpose of that, and how
Yep.
did you come about it?
So Connor, if you can go to the next page, last page. And I think if you can capture most of that in the page, the very top, we drafted this policy in 2022, but for one reason or another, it just never got adopted. So, but we've in essence been following it. So the very top is calculations from 2022. And if you walk down through that, I won't go down through every line of this part, but it shows a 10% reserve, 1,670,000, a 15% reserve, 2,510,000. So that was numbers from 2022. And this is where I would follow up with what Herb's question just was. Scroll down a little bit more, Connor. Information from June. So most recent information. And there's a couple things we look at. Milliman provides us an annual IBNR, incurred but not reported calculation. And I won't try and explain right now what incurred but not reported is because it's confusing. But it's an annual actuarial calculation, and they show us what they recommend our reserve should be. How much money would be needed to pay claims, in essence, is what they're looking at. So there's their amounts. Recommended 930,000, conservative 1.2 million. I think we've always taken the approach that we're more conservative than that. And GKG, our consultants kind of agree with that. Internally, we've wanted to be more conservative than that. The other thing we look at is just a calculation based on expenses. And the one way I think about this or would explain this is that if the plan closed down tomorrow, how much do you need to take care of business, to close out the plan? So claims, typically you think of 2 months of claims. And we also get calculations from Milliman that shows that it's called a trail or the lag of claims. So 2 months is typically an average, and the lag goes on for months and months and months that you're going to be paying claims because it takes a while for healthcare, doctors' offices, et cetera, to submit their claims. So it goes on for a long period of time, but 2 months is the industry standard. So if we look at 2024, annual claims were 16 million. I put in there the 2025-26, our estimated claims coming up are 16.6 million, so a slight increase. 10% of reserves is kind of a typical, what should a healthy reserve balance be? So that's 1.6 million. 15% is 2.4 million. And then if you look at 2 months of total plan costs, what we just talked about, if we had to close the plan and pay out 2 months of costs, it would be about 2.5 million. So those calculations show 2.4, 2.5 million. We again are a little bit more conservative, and we bumped that up to 3 million. So that's the calculation that got us there. I would say again, if you look at those two concepts, the Milliman IBNR and the claims expenses and a 2-month reserve for the claims expenses, at 3 million, we're conservative in both cases.
No, my understanding is that right now, if it wasn't for the infusion from the hospital, our reserves would probably be in the negatives.
And thank you, Vincent, because I was going to give you those dollar amounts earlier. We currently are at about $650,000
To the good.
to the good. And to your comment, yes, the hospital gave us 2.1 million back in December. So if you want to look at it that way, we're still negative. But $650,000 positive right now. We've been talking quite a bit about the benefit we're expecting coming in from New York State for these shared services with the Broome County Purchasing Alliance. We are pretty sure that's coming soon. I always say we can't count on New York State, but we're pretty sure that's coming soon, and that's about $2 million. Your previous action is guided that money would go straight into this reserve. So when we get that, that's going to be very beneficial and will get us basically to that minimum level.
Eric, how did you come up with the 25, 26 total plan estimated cost?
That comes again from Milliman, and I think we shared that with you 2 or 3 months ago. We get, prior to the plan year, June 1st, we get a full analysis from Milliman. They look at past plan costs, health insurance, industry standards, and they give us estimates for what they expect the coming year to be.
Thanks.
That $3 million, would that be a line item on the next year's budget? Is that how we would appropriate the money into that account?
No, it doesn't really work that way. The reserve, again, it really is just our cash and investments for the health fund that is part of our balance sheet that we hold on to. That's the purpose of the reserve. What goes in the budget is the cost to us as the employer for funding our share of the premium equivalents.
Okay.
So for every employee, we have to pay in 75% of their premium costs. That's our budgeted amount.
In order to get that fund balance to $3 million, that would be an increase in health insurance premiums the next time that came up. So we just started this plan year. We have 600,000 plus we have potentially what's coming in from New York State, about 2 million. So we should be about 2.6 million. And if our calculations are correct, that we should be pretty good this year. But next year you may want to increase the premiums just a little bit to keep bumping up that
That balance,
fund
right?
balance. Yep.
Yeah.
So it's
Right.
not a direct budget, county budget
Okay.
item.
That ties back to one of the earlier sections of that policy, that if we're not at the minimum, we would add on 5% to the calculated premium so that we could build the number up
Okay.
additionally.
Well, also too, I got another question. It said that if the fund balance falls below a minimum, this will trigger an increase to the plan. The timing of that increase would be up to the steering committee when to do it. Do we have to run this by the unions, or do they have to accept what we tell them at any given time, what the rates are?
Legislators have the authority to increase the premium equivalent rates, and you can do that at any time of the year. So no, that's not a bargain.
That won't change the
amount.
ratio then of what we're paying to what they have to pay.
No, the ratio, 75% employer, 25% employee, stays the same. That is bargained, but the level of the premium is not, and that is your decision.
Okay.
And we generally tend to try to do that increase just once a year for the June 1st plan year. We have in the past increased it in the middle of the year if it was really necessary.
And I just got one other question, and I'll yield. The steering committee has, what I'm reading here, has nobody from the board sitting on it. Is there a reason for that?
We actually, in the last few years, have invited board members. So you have had the opportunity, but historically, they've not been members of the committee, but you are certainly always welcome. We meet once a month with GKG.
I was going to say, because that's the final decision rests with us, and I think part of the decision-making process should involve, even if it's a chair or somebody, because I know some people have approached it. I was denied because of my involvement in it and stuff like that, but even so, there should be somebody from the legislature board sitting on it.
Yes. We have also just kicked off what we're calling a health advisory committee, had their first meeting just a couple weeks ago. And the goal of that committee was to expand from our internal management group and bargaining units, and those parties have met somewhat regularly over the last 2 to 3 years, but to expand also to other employee representatives, not bargaining unit, some management employees. So we did open up and that to additional membership for a new advisory committee. We had about 24 people invited, and most of them came to the first meeting. Legislators will be invited if you, I don't know if they've received an invitation, but you're going to be invited to the next meeting of that also and going forward.
When we formed that new committee, the old committee had, I believe, Barry, Tom, and Tom on it. And we've been meeting regularly last year. We decided to expand that just beyond the union membership to other people who are in it. We missed the 3 legislators on that meeting, but going forward, they're all going to be part of that.
Right, I agree. Dialogue is very important in a situation like this because we're involving so much of the county employees and everything else, and that they depend on us what we're going to do.
I just had one other question, maybe just to clarify it in my mind. So this committee will meet twice a year. Well, you'll be meeting more than that, but formally twice a year, basically.
Formally,
according
twice
to
a year,
this
we
model.
would address that reserve calculation.
So twice a year, you can change the rates?
We could. I think, I'm not sure if the policy is that flexible, but I think we could change it additionally that, because again, we're talking about it regularly. So if it was off of the 2 times a year cycle, we could consider a change at that time too.
Okay, so twice a year, it's possible to change the rate. We would be
I'd
able
say
to
that's a
change-
minimum. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And that would come before us to vote on it, the change in rates?
What we state in the policy is that the steering committee can make that change with notice to the Board of Legislators. That's in section 3. So the steering committee can change the dollar amount of the minimum with notice to the board. That's what we have in the draft policy.
Any other questions for Eric? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good questions. Looking forward to having this in place. So if there's any changes you'd like to see, yep. Where are you seeing May, Tim? Mhm. Yes, we can change that to, yep. Yep. Yep, I think that's a very good comment. And we do have October, so April and October, I think still makes some sense. So, yep. Mhm.
Anything else? Thank you very much, Eric. Then our second presentation is about cyber plan security with Connor Belosi. And because of that, what that is, we need to move into executive session. Can I get a motion to move to exec? Herb, seconded by Jeff. All in favor? Aye. Aye. We've moved into executive session.
I make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to move to create a cybersecurity committee.
We have a motion to create this committee. I'll make a second. Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Then I guess now we can move on to draft resolutions.
The first one I have is adopting the Lewis County Incident Response Plan.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
The next one is adopting the Mobile Device Use Plan.
Questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Adopting the amended investment policy and guidelines.
Questions or comments? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Adopting the health plan fund balance policy.
Questions or comments? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We got two opposed, Vince and Barry. Motion carried.
Awarding bid and authorizing contract with Lee Excavating and Demolition for the demolition and removal of a building located at 6314 West Main Street Turn for a cost not to exceed $24,450.
Questions or comments? All in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried.
We do have one motion to authorize closing non-essential county offices on Wednesday, August 6th from 2:00 PM to 4:30 PM for the annual Employee Appreciation and Recognition Event.
I make that a motion. Do I get a second? Herb, all in favor, aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Looking at the last resolution or the village, there's a discrepancy in the amount. One paragraph says 24,750 and the other paragraph says 24,450.
I will make sure that that is corrected on the final version that goes out.
Okay,
I'm assuming it's just a typo.
all right.
Which one is it? 27?
I honestly don't know.
Okay. And there's a few informational items that you can read, items that are moving along. Is there anything else for this committee at this time? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Jeff and Herb, all in favor of adjournment? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. All right, thank you.
Andrea, you can call the meeting whenever you're ready.
I'll call the meeting of the General Services Committee together. I will make a motion to approve the June 17th committee minutes if there are no amendments. Could I have a second? Thank you. And at this time, we'll do our presentation by Shannon Clark of the 2025 Lewis County Hazardous Mitigation Plan.
built environment in terms of, you know, dams, critical infrastructure, the buildings, bridges, roads, culverts, but also things like community sense is important to that, even if it's not going to show up, you know, in a federal, database for critical infrastructure. You know, those things are integrated and incorporated, right? So we're talking about our local fire department, our schools, community centers, things like that, what their risks are, you know, and, thinking about, you know, exposure analyses and making those things concrete in this plan. And then, you know, of course, we talk about the effects that a disaster of any of those hazards could have on or have had, on those assets, so that we can be very specific about developing actions to mitigate those risks. So the planning process overall, where we are now is basically at this place where we're going to draft, we're going to submit petitions very soon. This plan is a massive, massive undertaking. It's, you know, it ends up being thousands of pages. Volume one is sort of a county-wide perspective of the community profile, but also every hazard, that is, you know, deemed a hazard of concern has a standalone chapter that has all of the pieces of the risk assessment that I described. And that is, like I said, the county perspective, and then sort of moves into, local, case studies, I guess you could say. And then volume two is an individual chapter for every single, municipality that is just like a mini HMP, right? So those are, they've got the risk assessment, they've got the FEMA program, the kinds of mitigation actions they wanted to see developed. So, the process got a little bit more, involved in more detail, to move into that, policy update. And so, there will be some things that are different in the plan, but, just wanted to share that kind of what underpins the plan, what the plan, is required to do, did shift quite a bit after not, that policy had not been updated in many years. That's happened a lot. So the benefit of participating in NHMP is really the, potential grant, funds that become available, right? So this program, is, like I said, administered by FEMA through the New York State dishes. And the idea is that it's a good investment to update this plan and ask the communities to show up and provide, their experience and their expertise to, make the county and the communities, eligible for, many, many millions, of dollars every year. In these grant funds, there's also a lot of other not grant funds, but federal funds that are tied to 404 mitigation, which is what this is, right? The public assistance that comes in after a disaster, the individual assistance that comes in after a disaster, both that fall in the realm of the mitigation fund. And so to do a quick dive into exactly what these grant funds are. The 2024 HMA program is here. Unfortunately, Brick, has been, I'll say, retired in this new administration, and that was a annually competitive grant program that was into the billions of dollars of grant funding nationwide. So that's no more, and it was a profit plan, but that has been changed. But we still do have these other grant programs, right? So FMA, flood mitigation assistance, that is specifically targeting buildings that are insured via the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program. That is an annual grant program and is competitive within New York State, but also nationally. Then we've got HHPP, which is a high hazard potential grant program. So that specifically targets Class C high hazard potential dam. That is also annual and nationally competitive. And then we've got the state revolving loan program for hazard mitigation. That one is new since your last one in 2020. And again, it's one of these things that occurs annually. What we talk about a lot more at the state and local level are these post-disaster programs, because these are the things that, are established once a disaster has occurred and are only competitive within New York State. And, priority is given to, funding, planning, and projects in counties that were designated as part of those disasters, which, you all were in the summer of 2024, right? So HMGP is sort of the big one where, it's typically tens of millions of dollars that become available for these mitigation actions, after an event. The same thing with HMGP post-fire. In New York State, we haven't seen a lot of that, but, that is changing year over year. We are having more intense and frequent wildfires. So, this plan makes the county and all of its jurisdictions eligible for that funding as well. And so it's flood mitigation assistance footprint. So that's kind of like FMA. So for NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program property in the aftermath of an event. So unlike the other FMAs that I was referring to, which is an annual grant program, which is nationally competitive, if it's a split current grant, it is, a post-disaster only within New York State grant. And then we, have this grant program as leverage for other grant programs. So this, these FEMA funds can be used as local match for non-FEMA grant funds, right? So we're talking about HUD, CDBG NIT, the Community Development Block grant and mitigation funds, SBA disaster loan funds, and other New York State grant programs, of which at the moment, fortunately, there are many. There are really billions of dollars at this moment in New York State that are available through DEC and NYSERDA for, mitigation and resilience projects. And so, these things can all be leveraged together so that they cover the local match and the county and community, don't actually have to spend hard cash. They just have to kind of coordinate these two grants. So, it's nice to think about this opportunity, going beyond the FEMA grant programs, right? Like a legitimate planning process, like the one that the county has just experienced, is something that can be leveraged in grant applications outside of FEMA, right? Where you can say, we had a formal process, everybody was involved, we have these, documented outcomes, and that just makes you all more competitive for other grant programs as well. And so what I just want to highlight on quickly before we wrap and talk about what the last piece of action is that, the jurisdictional annex that is the individual chapter for each municipality, like I said, is a place where we, had deep engagement with locals, and we talked about things in real specificity for, what their risks are, like which roads and which buildings and what happens, and those were really fruitful conversations that are very, very well documented in the plan. Which is just an important thing beyond meeting requirements, but having a clear resource for communities, especially when turnover happens or there's shifts in personnel. Like this is just another place where hopefully we have a resource that is valuable to the community aside from applying for grant funds. And so mitigation actions, just like pull that out of the abstract, these are real sort of concrete projects that, can protect, upsize, and improve, infrastructure. So things like elevating roads, bridges, culverts, drainage, elevations and acquisitions in the floodplain, installing riprap or retaining walls, and then there are other things that are, a little more on the nature-based side of things, right? So restoration and preservation that also have benefits to, for example, reducing flood risk, right? Or improving water quality. We were able to have some of those more straightforward things like culvert upsizing, but also have some other things that, have co-benefits for the natural environment and preserving, your natural resources. So those are the actions that will be included in the plan. And like I said, will be then eligible for grant applications. And, the aspiration always is to have improved public safety through going through a process like this. Of course, preventing damage to the local economy. And we talked at length with communities about their local economies and, what was important to them, with limited resources to, try to harden or improve. Then there on the emergency management side is hopefully the improvement of continuity of operations because, you've gotten all these people to the table, we've had, like I said, very pointed discussions, and it's just, another opportunity to interface, collaborate, and, hopefully improve the overall functionality of those emergency management services. And then the last one here, reduce the cost of disaster response and recovery, right? That's always an aspirational piece here, right? The idea being that we know that these things are going to happen, but if we're more prepared, if we have established, better lines of communication, if we've applied for these grants and hopefully, are implementing them, we just made quality of life better, right? So, I think Lewis County, you all really showed up and made this planning process so much more fruitful than it can be. And it was stewarded with so much care and so much presence by the planning department and the steering committee that I would commend, the effort, that was involved in getting this plan updated and not leaving it as something just totally rote. So from my perspective, I'm grateful for that. I hope that, it serves all of you, over the next 5 years, which is the life cycle of this plan update. So with that, I will kind of leave my, contact information here, and I don't know if you all have any questions, or if if I will, of course, share this PowerPoint, and I will also share the story map, which is a website that we created for, this plan, which is sort of like a high-level risk assessment summary. We also have a hazard mitigation, website dedicated to, creating transparency around the update itself. So, in my follow-up email, I will include the slide deck, but also both of those, on.
Any questions for Shannon?
Okay, great. Yes, my pleasure, my absolute pleasure.
This time, we'll ask Lauren Table to give us a presentation on Lewis County solar analysis.
Okay, so hello, I'm going to be giving an overview of the solar array and the project as a whole, and then how we get credits from it. So just an outline of what I'm going to cover, a background is the project. I'm going to share how the array is producing, how that production impacts our payments to Green Skies. I'll show our 2024 energy usage and then how credits were applied, and then calculate the county's net financial benefit. So some background, in case you did not know, there is a solar array behind the public safety building. It went live in May of 2018. It covers around 10 acres and it's 2.7 megawatts capacity. It is owned, it was installed, and maintenance is done by Green Skies Renewables. So the county has a power purchase agreement, a PPA, where, like I said, Green Skies owns, operates, and maintains the solar system on county property. And the county then purchases the electricity that's generated at a fixed rate of 7.9 cents per kilowatt. The energy then goes into the grid through the meter, and National Grid gives the county monetary credits on our energy bills, which are valued between 13 to 16 cents per kilowatt. And then because we're getting more than we're paying, that is how we're able to see a savings. So diving into the solar array, this is a chart showing the production by month for each year. You can see at the top, each year is color coded differently. And you can see how they all dip down in the winter months because of the lack of sunlight. So that's just to give an idea of what the production looks like. And then, so how is it performing? When I was talking with Tom, we thought the best way to show this would be through the capacity factor, which is the actual output divided by the maximum output times 100. So 100% capacity factor would be 24/7 sunlight, which obviously is not realistic, but that would be 1.9 million kilowatts produced. So the next down for our region would be 4 hours of sunlight per day. That would be ideal. And that is that dark blue line you're seeing on the top, just to show times that we have gone over that. And that brings us down to a 16.7% factor, just with what sunlight is typical around here. And then what they call realistic, which is 85% of the ideal, That's that pink line that brings us down to 14.2%. And then our 2024 average is the light blue, that was 12.3%. And then just to give an idea of the lifetime production, that is 10.7% capacity factor. This is just a chart showing each year with the total kilowatts that were produced and then how that impacted our GRE payments, green skies. So like I said earlier, we pay based on the production. So you can see the direct correlation that when it produces more, we pay them more. And when it produces less, we can pay them less. And then that table on the side is just showing the payments in kilowatts produced for each year that was plugged in to make this chart. So now I'm going to transition into National Grid and how that impacts our credits on our energy bills. So in case you didn't know, there are 24 National Grid meters that the county has. I have them listed out here. And then I included a pie chart showing our 2025 credit allocation, which is something that we just updated at the end of last year. Since Highway had a new meter, we wanted to make sure they were on there because they're one of the higher users. And then just to give an idea of how the credits work, I thought it would be best to just give a sample of one of our credit statements. So at the number 1, you'll see our electric service for this month in July of 2024. It was negative 54,000. Those are the credits that were earned that billing period. And then the 35,000 is the credits that were applied to the current charges that month. So this month we must not have had enough charges to exhaust all the credits. So that negative 19,000 is what was added to the bank. And then the credit balance at the end of this month was negative 131,000. So those are banked credits. This is just the total energy usage for 2024 by each building, just to give an idea of where the buildings are at. Some of our biggest users of kilowatts are highway, DSS, public safety, the hospital meters, and the courthouse. So our total kilowatt usage in 2024 was almost 7 million kilowatts. And then this is the same graph, but with the blue line showing what our charges would have been if we did not have credits. So it would have been charged 423,993. And then this pink line is showing what we actually were charged. So 48,714 is what we paid National Grid. So that is a savings of 374,974.36. So then the county benefit snapshot, taking consideration the GRE payments being subtracted from the credits, I just showed the net benefit. And then for 2018, I noted that I do not have data from May through October of 2018. So that would show why it's so in the red. But that is all. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren.
Okay, we will go on to draft resolutions.
Okay, the first one is awarding bid and authorizing agreement with Jeff Koss Carpentry for snow removal, summertime maintenance, and related services at all 9 911 tower sites within regions 1 and 2 for the 25-26 snow and summer season at a cost of $33,000 payable in 4 installments on November 1st, 2025, April 1st, 2026, June 1st, 2026, and October 1st, 2026.
All in favor, say aye. Any nays? And is there any discussion? Carried.
The next one is awarding bid and authorizing an agreement with Rose Lawn Care LLC for snow removal and related services at 7714 Number 3 Road, Lowell, for the 25-26 snow season at a cost of $5,000 for snow and ice removal, plus $150 per hour for the payloader and $120 per hour in dump truck fees.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any nays? Carried.
The next one is awarding bid and authorizing agreement with CGR of Rochester, New York to provide professional consultation services to review data and evaluate the current EMS ambulance services in the county and evaluate alternative service models for cost effectiveness and efficiencies into the future with recommended development and an action plan creation for a cost of $60,000 with funds being transferred from legislative special contingency into emergency management account lines with final completion and delivery of a final report on or about December 31st, 2025.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any negative? Carried.
The next one is authorizing the submission of the 2025-2026 Snowmobile Trail Grant and Aid Program application through the Director of Recreation, Forestry, and Parks.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any nays? Carried.
And the last one is introductory local law number 6-2025, the amended local law regulating and permitting special events on county roads, trails, or other county property, and on any town roads and property where the town has opted in, and setting the public hearing.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Will,
Oh, sorry.
will this be sent to all the towns? Yeah, because the towns that opted in is opted into the old one. So this will be a brand new.
Yes.
Okay.
This is just setting the public hearing.
So they would have to opt into this plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other discussions? All in favor, say aye. Any nays? Carried. There are no motions. There is no executive session, and I would ask for an adjournment, please. Thank you. Could I get a second? Thanks, Jeff. We're adjourned.
Call the Human Service Committee to order. I am making a motion to approve the June 17th, 2025 committee minutes. If no amendments, do I have a second? Vinny, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Moved. Okay, we have two presentations today. The first presentation we're going to start off with is Threat Assessment Management Plan. So I'm going to welcome Matthew Morrow, Director of Probation, up front.
Okay. So the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Plan was submitted to the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Unit, the Office of Counterterrorism, which is a division of New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services on June 1, 2025. So the DTPU, the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Unit, was created by Governor Hochul's Executive Order number 18 following the May 14, 2022 domestic terror attack inspired by white supremacist ideology at the Tops Friendly Market grocery store in the East Side neighborhood of Buffalo. And in that attack, 10 people were killed. So pursuant to that executive order, every New York State county must develop and maintain a domestic terrorism prevention plan to identify and confront threats of domestic terrorism. So the original iteration of the plan was due in 2023. And at that time, counties were strongly encouraged to have a behavioral threat assessment and management TAM team as part of the component of that plan back then. So we've now submitted the 2025 plan, and we're still working to establish and set up a TAM team to prevent targeted violence. So what is targeted violence? So according to the U.S. Secret Service's National Threat Assessment Center, targeted violence is a premeditated act of violence directed at a specific individual, group, or location, regardless of motivation and generally unrelated to other criminal activity. So premeditated, it serves a purpose for those who plan to conduct the violent attacks. All instances of targeted violence and almost all mass murders are premeditated. They don't just happen on a whim. But the planned nature provides us with an opportunity for the behavioral threat assessment process to prevent an attack. So thinking back to the Buffalo shooting in 2022, that perpetrator had posted online a 180-page manifesto voicing support for a great replacement conspiracy theory in the context of a white genocide. There was a report a year previous where he had made a threatening statement at his high school. In the months leading up to this attack, he had purchased weapons and ammo. He picked Buffalo, although it was 200 miles from where he resided in Broome County, because that was the closest city to him that had the highest population of Black residents. The day before the shooting, he did reconnaissance at the store, and he had actually had plans to conduct further attacks after the Tops shooting and he even live streamed his attack. So this is from Dishes. There's what they call the pathway to violence. So it starts with a personal grievance, a perceived wrong, and then you kind of progress up the scale with ideation, research and planning, preparation for violence, probing or breaching. So probing or breaching was the day before that Tops Market shooting when he went to the store and did some reconnaissance, and then the actual attack. So as it says in the middle there is where there's opportunity to prevent the attack. Some mass attack trends. 65% of the attackers exhibited behaviors that concerned others. So of all the known like school shootings or mass attacks, at least 2/3 of them had behaviors that somebody in their life was concerned about. Over half the attackers, 57%, their behaviors resulted in others fearing for their own safety. And 41% of the attackers exhibited changes in behavior that were observable to others. So how do we keep people from escalating up the pathway to violence? That's where the TAM team or behavioral BTAM or TAM, they're kind of interchangeable, comes in. So a tip or a lead would be reported through a traditional 911 call or directly to the TAM team. At some point, we'll have to establish a TAM tip line. The tip would be verified by a trained reviewer, which would include law enforcement if the original call is the 911. If it's terrorism, there's a nationwide information sharing through the Joint Terrorism Task Force. If it's non-terrorism but still criminal, it would go to law enforcement for a standard criminal investigation. But if there are tips, threats, or observable behaviors that may concern others with no clear nexus to either terrorism or criminal behavior, that's when the TAM model would be utilized. The TAM model has 4 main components: identify, investigate or inquiry, assess, and manage. So I guess kind of to back up, before we can really identify, we have to form a TAM team. That's kind of where the stages that we're at right now. So the team should have a designated leader. If you all remember, I was appointed in April to become the TAM leader. So I'm still new to this. Normally when I'm up here talking to you guys, it's something that I'm kind of an expert in already. Like I'm still learning this stuff. The team should be multidisciplinary, consultative, creative, and flexible. The team should have established protocols and procedures, and they should meet on a regular basis. So along with that, this is what Dishes puts out, just kind of an idea of who should be on a TAM team. We're still working on our list of community stakeholders, but we're hoping that it will include members of the New York State Police, the Lewis County Sheriff's Office, Lavelle Village PD, New York State Parole, Lewis County DA's office, obviously Lewis County Probation, since I'm part of it, Lewis County Community Services, Social Services, Emergency Management, and then other providers in the county like NERCL, Thrive, Pivot, Mobile Crisis, the Children's Home, some members from the Lewis County Health System, every school district, including BOCES, religious leaders in our community, Office for the Aging, hope to have a representative from Fort Drum, and then local businesses like Kraft, Walmart, AMF. And so identifying, we need to create a mechanism to receive tips. I already mentioned that. We'll hope to have a tip line or maybe an online aspect to it. And we need to increase community involvement. The community has to know that TAM is there and that they can make referrals. And then once tips are coming in, we'll need to triage those tips. So if we get a tip and we feel that an attack is imminent, then obviously immediate action must be taken. So that could be either an immediate arrest, increased physical security of either the individual or the potential targets, and or a lockdown of a potential target location like a school or a business. But if an attack is not imminent, then the TAM team can conduct an assessment. Oops. I think I went one too far, Connor. How do I back up? And then the second step is investigate or inquiry. This is where information sharing among the multidisciplinary team is very important. The investigation or inquiry can help to distinguish between someone who's making a threat versus someone who's just making a threat versus someone who actually poses a threat. So with information sharing, this is where we will run into some roadblocks and some difficulties because there's stuff like FERPA, the Family Educational Rights Act from school, or HIPAA from health providers. But there are exemptions to FERPA and HIPAA when it comes to serious threats or health or safety. And one of the goals of this multidisciplinary team would be to kind of prevent the siloing of information. We all work within our own silos. We keep that information that's associated with our purpose within our own silo. I always think back to a few years ago, my wife is a school teacher. She had an elementary student who kept stealing in the classroom, and the school just couldn't figure out why. And when it was just contained to the school, the kid, he or she wouldn't answer why. But then a few months down the road, social services gets involved. They find out there's neglect at the home. Then it all kind of spins around and they realize this kid's not eating outside of the school. So he's stealing his friend's food so that he can go home and feed himself and his sibling when he's not in school. So that's a non-TAM related story about siloing, but in the harmful effects of it. And it's just a little funny little video if I can make it play. We did it earlier, Connor. And forward ones. No. Oh, well, I'll talk about it anyway. So this is Donald Rumsfeld. He was the Secretary of Defense, and he's talking in 2002 about the lack of evidence linking the government of Iraq with the supply of weapons of mass destruction. And Rumsfeld says, glad I wrote it all down. Reports that say something hasn't happened are always interesting to me because, as we know, there are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns, the ones we don't know we don't know. And if one looks throughout the history of our country and other free countries, it is the latter category that tends to be the difficult ones. So the things we don't know, we don't know. But hopefully, if we're all coming together in a multidisciplinary team, a lot of those unknowns become known quickly. And the third step is assess. So the goal of assessment is to prevent future acts of targeted violence, develop a holistic view of the individual and his or her environment, and inform determinations about how to move the person off the pathway to violence. So this is where the team would determine if there are any risk factors like a history of violence, any health or mental health concerns, weapon access. Are there any life stressors, problems at work or at home, relationship issues? Did somebody just get broken up with? Financial issues? Are there any warning behaviors? Have they identified a target or become fixated on a target? the unusual acquisition of weapons or unusual weapons expertise all of a sudden, an expressed or implied intent to harm or directly communicated threat? Or have they suddenly stopped taking medications or changed in their substance use? Sometimes there's end of life planning, like somebody be giving away possessions or getting rid of a pet, a loved pet, or a sudden withdrawal from other life patterns. On the flip side of that, we would want to consider whether this person might have any mitigating factors such as positive life goals, realistic goals, supportive family, positive coping mechanisms, or maybe they're already engaged in some sort of mental health or alcohol and substance abuse treatment. And then the final is manage the individual. So DISHES uses a step implementation. So the S in STEP is the subject. De-escalate, contain, or control the subject who may take the violent action. So TAM might take no further action on a tip that comes in, or you might watch and wait to see what happens. Or there's third-party monitoring, so maybe through a friend or a coworker or a family member. There could be third-party intervention. You could make a referral to a treatment or something. Or there could be a direct interview where the TAM team interviews the subject. You could have administrative actions such as like a suspension from school or some sort of workplace sanction. There could be civil actions. That's where like an ERPO or TERPO comes into place, or orders of protection. Obviously, criminal enforcement, if it's criminal nature, could lead to an arrest. Or there could be mental health commitments. The T in STEP is target. So you want to decrease the vulnerabilities of the target. So that could be changing in work hours or workplace relocation, or varying routes that potential target takes to get to work, changing their routines and activities. Could be something as simple as a parking lot escort at their place of employment, or other personal safety planning. The environment is modify the physical and cultural environment to discourage escalation. More increased vigilance and target hardening. Like schools have done a lot of environmental stuff with their bulletproof glass at doors and locked doors and stuff. And then the P in STEP is for precipitating. So you want to prepare for and mitigate against precipitating events that may trigger adverse reactions from the individual. Basically prepare for the unexpected in the best way that you can. Maybe this is where you would take steps to try to address the perceived grievance too. So then this came from DISHES as well. This was part of the plan. I won't go into a lot of detail about the plan, but man, that's bigger when I look at it in my computer. So the plan has all these components. Jurisdictional overview of the county, I had to provide them. A review of the county intelligence and information sharing networks that already exist. Examine the public outreach and education efforts that we plan to take. How we're going to participate in and promote training in our county. How we will establish, organize, and maintain our TAM team. Consider how to facilitate bystander reporting, which we've kind of already addressed in here. And then identify potential targets, assess vulnerabilities, and engage in target hardening. So I had to work with Homeland Security to get that plan in place. They came up here actually and did a working session with me. Then before it was submitted, I met with the Sheriff's Office, Emergency Management, and Community Services to review sections of the plan. So now that it's been submitted, I'm awaiting some feedback from them. And also currently working with Shauna at Community Services to finalize our list of key stakeholders. And then the county is already contracted with a consultant agency called Squad 9. So they will come up here, do some training for us with our stakeholders. And we will hopefully soon be having a TAM team up and running. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Matt?
You've done a lot with the state. What are you going to need from the county to help finish this, to get this complete?
Just some buy-in. I think for the most part, we have some good buy-in. I know some county departments didn't want to have anything to do with doing the plan, but I'm hoping that they'll want to be part of the team, I guess is a fair way to say that.
Anyone else? Thank you. So our second presentation of the day will be the security guard prevailing wage increases. And I'm going to welcome Jennifer Jones, Commissioner of Social Services, forward.
There we go. Thank you. So it's probably fortuitous that I came up here right after Matt's presentation about safety, right? So one of the things that I know is always on everybody's mind is the cost. So New York State Department of Labor sets prevailing wage rates. Many people are familiar with that concept. They come into effect July 1st. This is the first time upstate districts, upstate counties were identified and bifurcated armed security from unarmed security. So that wage rate has nothing to do with our provider or contractor. It has everything to do with the Department of Labor setting that wage rate. What's interesting for Department of Social Services, because we are a high target, is New York State does support us very significantly in our ability to have security. So we're really only talking about a $6,500 difference local share cost. It's really not much to think about. So I put some information in the report about the prevailing wage, why it went up, and then the net local cost share. But I think the rationale behind it is really important as well as why we get so much reimbursement. And we've had armed security for the past 10 years. So I want you to think about that and what's happened over the course of 10 years. We are considered a high target location, everything Matt just talked about. He mentioned we did not plan it, Child Protective Services going out and seeing families and what's happening with their kids. Worst case scenario, we remove kids, sometimes to foster care, sometimes to relatives. I will tell you that doesn't make families very happy, right? Our Child Advocacy Center is on site at DSS. Our adult protective people are out there. I remember one personal threat I got, although years ago, is because I had to work on putting someone's mother in a nursing home due to the neglect and abuse happening within that location. That gentleman was found less than a mile from my house when he was pulled over for a DWI. So, you don't know what that flip factor is going to be for people when they get upset. Predominantly in our office. Now, I know Tim said to me, I'm more worried about your people that are out in the community. Absolutely. And we have very little protection when we're out there. But within the building as well, there's a lot of stuff, and I'm going to use that until I go into a little bit more detail. So temporary and emergency housing, right? That's when people are coming in, they're usually very, very desperate.
So I put a picture in the report. That is not Lewis County. But that happened a week ago in another county where those weapons were removed. Now, I will tell you, the commissioner in that county said to me, Jenny, he didn't come in with the intent to use them. He came in as homeless and didn't have anywhere to store them. But still, they came in. All right. I will tell you the proliferation of parolees coming into our office is significant. I put some other ones in there, but just Friday, we had a parolee come in a docks van about 2:00. His parole officer can't even meet with him alone because of his dangerous level. There's multiple corrections officers with orders of protection against him due to his behavior. Now, if I would say to him, or one of my employees has to say, I'm sorry, I can't put you up because you didn't finish your drug and alcohol evaluation last time you were out, I don't think he's going to be very happy with us. And that's the issue. They flip fast. So within the last year, we had another parolee that we were working with for multiple months, homeless, dealing drugs for sure. And we were denying him emergency shelter after not completing certain things that he needed to do. He was then seen driving around past our employees' houses, multiple reports from different employees. He drove a vehicle that was very, very identifiable. So we knew that. We reported that to law enforcement. But when I came out to intervene in the lobby, he was able to recite my 911 address for me and where I lived and what color my house was and everything else. Not uncommon. I know, Anna, you hear about 730 evaluations. We had a gentleman homeless for months and in and out of the hotels, multiple hotels. Just his mental health had deteriorated, probably in conjunction with some substance use. But that gentleman then eventually had a 730 order, was remanded for evaluation and restoration. But yet DSS is dealing with him before any of that happens because he's homeless. My security guards report that it's not uncommon to take away pepper spray and tasers from people when they come in. We've had people come in with weapons, they have concealed carry, and I'm not talking law enforcement, people with a concealed carry permit. They're asked to leave it quite often, and I've seen them. I've been in the lobby when they've said, it's obvious you're carrying, don't lie. Please surrender your weapon or go lock it in your vehicle. At least 2 different gentlemen have not returned to our office because we refuse to allow that. Another gentleman, I put the example in here, he did come back without his gun. So that was very helpful. And he was using employment services, not anything else. Child support. Right now, I think we have 5 people incarcerated due to failure to pay child support. So when we do those lovely orders in child support where we remand people to jail or we seize a bank account, that really irritates people and gets them very upset. I've been around for a long time, y'all know that, but a few years ago, we had a gentleman whose bank account we did seize, and it was Friday. He's a construction worker, and his big paycheck was coming in, and he couldn't get it. And he came rip-roaring into the DSS parking lot. And I'll tell you, I lied my way out of that one. I told him I was a scanning clerk because I thought at that point, no one can hear me scream. And security wasn't there. They had already left. I put in here an old survey from 2015, and I just wanted you to take a look at it because I don't think a lot has really changed about where the threats happen. And they happen a lot at DSS, right? We take adverse action against people all the time. And I really do feel that we need armed security. If someone's coming at them with pepper spray or tasers or anything else, and they don't have anything, it's just of no value for us. So, and the reason I put it on there is 15 years ago, that's why we decided to go with armed security at that point, was because of, that was one part of the survey, but it was really related to what happens. And our security guards have, there's a little bit of a letter in there from our security officers. about why they feel it is so necessary. And you can see someone that's very compliant sitting there doing well, and then suddenly they're not. And that's the problem. And yes, they've taken people out in headlocks. They've dragged people out through the front door. They've called the police. But the big goal overall, right, is for them to be a deterrent, to maintain order within the office building. It is not uncommon to see them stand in a doorway like they needed to do Friday because that interview was getting a little loud and a little contentious. And that was with a parole officer in the room as well. But we had to have our security guards there for the safety of our employees. And I do anticipate in the next year, with the big changes and cuts happening because of the federal budget, we're going to be denying more people services, cash, heating, and food assistance. That's really not going to make people very happy in the next year. So that's what I have. What kind of questions do you have for me? I didn't have a ton of specific numbers because they don't make a report to me to say, oh, I took away a taser today, or I took away pepper spray and locked it up and gave them back when they left, because that's just the standard protocol of what we have in our office. So,
I got a couple questions, Jenny.
sure.
You said our share is 25%. Do you see a cut coming on the other half, other percentage of that? Is that from the state or from the federal government?
It's a combination of factors. I don't think that particular thing will be cut. We'll have some administrative changes around the SNAP program that'll be related to our SNAP eligibility determinations and SNAP employment and training.
Right. Also too, Tim, I guess this is to you, to move the contract cycle to 7/1 to, July 1st to June 30th. Is there a problem? Do we do that with anybody else where the contract negotiations in the middle of the year versus at the budget? There is, so there wouldn't be any issue.
Right now, we do it in like April or May. And I think that's just was the timing when we initiated this 10 years ago, but now it doesn't align to the prevailing wage adjustments. I think we probably should just take a look at that. And that's kind of a simple fix. We'll either extend one or start another one early.
Do you think there's any reason why the Department of Labor was so long in coming on this? Or are we caught up now? Are we going to see this happen every year with the Department of Labor?
I have
Or
no
is this
idea.
the state's going to be rolling the dice?
I have no idea. Maybe Tim has additional.
Yeah, I talked to the Department of Labor and they said that it was actually just an oversight on their part that they hadn't published it. And it had been the case for quite a while. And it was just their mistake. There was no legislative change, no policy change, just they had never published it.
Oops.
Right. Yeah. I did put some information in there from multiple counties that have armed security. I will tell you that they have a combination of private contractors. They have used sheriff's department deputies. I personally think that's a waste of a law enforcement individual to be a security officer. And they've got bigger things to do and better things to be worried about. And they do come over. But I'll tell you, before security, we had some incidents where, the first car on site was the DC officer because patrol was not next door.
Okay.
And you don't expect them to be next door. So it could take some time before they can respond.
I got one other thing, and it's just a hypothetical. This armed security guard is your primary line of defense or protection, whatever. Say, God forbid, something happens, that individual goes down. Is there a backup plan to protect the employees up there if this person is removed or taken out of the picture?
Well, we use the same protocol that Homeland Security would tell you to run, hide, fight when there's, if it's an active shooter, we train and run, hide, fight to do that. But we get behind locked doors. We have done that. We've cleared the lobby. We've cleared the public areas. We've taken our clients and, secreted them in, everybody get behind a locked door because there's a problem out front. So.
Is there a one emergency lockdown button in the building?
No. The only corridor that is public access is that central kind of circle-y thing.
Right.
And the break room. Everything else you can get, like Office for Aging, Anna Plotz's office,
Right.
anything. You get behind those doors, they can't get in. They are locked down all the time.
Right.
So that's the safety key is to.
I'm just
to
seeing
get
a
in there.
time factor there where, seconds matter in a situation like that, where an automatic lockdown for everybody, That's just a
That's the
personal
closest we
opinion.
can get. People
Yeah.
that are in the interview rooms, and we have exited the interview rooms occasionally. It's nothing that happens routinely at all. We've pulled them out and pulled them into the locked area and taken them down a hallway to
Okay.
try to get people safe. You know, just weird things happen sometimes.
I just want to make sure that we have the best protection available for all our employees.
I
out
would
there.
imagine some of these people that I clearly identified, and the reason I didn't hand this out to the general public is people might be able to understand who some of these people are based on the description that I gave, is they'd probably be referred to threat, you know, the TAM team, right? So,
Yeah, that was my question, Jenny, is, I know this is 2015, you know, attempt or threat, harassment. Has
Mhm.
anybody been arrested?
they've been reported and it's gone on file, but like the gentleman that was driving by people's houses, you can drive on the public road. You know, you can
So,
go 20 miles an hour.
so there, some of these are already stepping over the line.
Yep.
To fall into,
Yeah.
what Matt just talked
For
about.
sure. They got arrested. That gentleman was arrested. It was on a different matter. It wasn't related to the threats against us. It was related to his drug activity. So, but, you know, people are people, and some can really toe the line, and they're, you know, but others are there, and they're in pretty desperate situations when they come into DSS. And you know, we try to help everybody and treat everybody as personally as possible, you know, kind of reduce that stress, try to break up interviews, try to do everything we can. But there's just times that it's just not controllable.
On line 5,
Mhm.
which best describe, is that saying 10? Or
No, well, coworkers, they said 10. Yes, I don't know what that means actually, but
I mean, that's
it was-
concerning if it's 10.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 coworkers. Yeah, we're in a high stress job at times, many times, and people get snippy with each other. From 10 years ago, what's snippy and what's a threat? It's hard to say at times. So we deal with it quite a bit. I don't want to be callous about it, but I will tell you, my employees feel much, much safer having an armed security officer on site.
Does he have a taser besides
No, no, they don't. Mm-mm.
So why aren't we just looking at hiring another deputy and putting a sheriff up there?
Well, if you do the cost analysis, it's pretty close, right? I talked to a couple counties that have law enforcement, and usually that's the larger counties, and they have a mix of private and law enforcement. But then you're taking a law enforcement person off patrol, you're sticking them in the DSS lobby, you're paying them, you've got your legacy cost related to retirement. 3 counties told me they do that, and they have a heck of a time staffing. Then they go without because that deputy gets pulled for something else. So they're not 100% dedicated to that. When we made that decision, 10 years ago, really it was more about, it was much more cost effective, right? The prevailing wage has kind of kicked us. Then it went way up. But I just think it's not a good use of law enforcement to function that way. It's an option. I do think in the end, it ends up costing more between training, uniforms, guns, gun belt, car, just like you're dealing with the SROs, and what's the real cost of that?
My
Mhm.
question was going to be even the village. Has the village ever been approached on offering protection? I mean, even though it's the county
No.
interviewed in IMA on that?
No, because we've had 10 years of where it's been so much more cost effective the other way.
What is our time frame on the contract and prevailing wage going into effect? Do we have time to table this to talk to the sheriff's department?
We're going to have to go back to 7/1. Our contract is tied to prevailing wage, which went up July 1st.
Which we can financially swing till we make a decision, but ultimately we've got to make a decision. And Jenny and I had a conversation, and obviously she feels very passionate about it, as she should. And we want to, show our employees that we care, but we want to bring this forward have a thorough discussion because we know there's going to be a lot of changes coming up, and Jenny does have some information prepared for next month. We're going to have a little bit more thorough conversation about what we see happening to the county from the federal changes. So we wanted to make sure that any of these things that are going to impact financially to the taxpayers, that you guys have a thorough look at.
There's an odd thing too, Jessica, when Matt referenced about multidisciplinary teams and how much information you can share. One of the odd things about DSS is we can share with law enforcement in a multidisciplinary team case, but I can't share with law enforcement if they just call over and say, hey, Jenny, where does Jenny Jones live? I can't share that. And then you have law enforcement right on site. They know who's got a warrant. They know who's got, and I'm not promoting escaping warrants or anything like that. That's actually on our applications, but it puts that deputy in this position where they hear and know information that they can't necessarily share with their primary employer. And it has created issues in other DSSs where that's happened.
My concern would be doing all of this, not knowing what's coming forward with financial situations. So I would prefer to table this, to talk to the sheriff's department to see what options we do have, or until next month when we have a little better idea of the financial, where we're
It's
going to
been
take
quite difficult
cuts.
for the sheriff to recruit as well, right? Yeah. I mean,
That's why I'd like to talk to him to see if
Can
that's
the
an
village
option.
be in part of that discussion, to your point, Tim? Because, I mean, you have the village, you have the Lewis County Sheriff's Department, you got the, off in the fringe, the DEC police, and you got the state police. You got multi-layers of police
state
protection.
police will not do that. The state
No, I'm
police are
not
not
saying,
any
I'm not
DSS.
saying this, but you got multi-law enforcement layers here.
Yeah, I'll put something together with the village police and the sheriff and
And truthfully, right
members of
now,
this
law
committee.
enforcement can be security officers. They could work for this company and help provide protection that way. And actually, in the beginning, we thought our current security officers are retired Department of Corrections. That's why they can carry. But it's an option that some counties have taken. Absolutely. And now the cost is probably just about even. I did not go and calculate because I don't have access to the fringe costs. You're pretty close because of that cost with health insurance and then vacancy covering for vacations.
Right, but then I guess I was thinking that also we have a sheriff that can actually, or level PD that can actually do something about it. And if you're closed, I know you're not closed very many days, but that deputy could be used elsewhere. So that's why, if the sheriff was willing to have another personnel there, hire another deputy, if we're able to, or VPD, what other options are out there? Because like the hospital does not have security, does it?
No,
And
it
on this,
doesn't,
they're the
and it
next
should.
one. So it's,
And it absolutely should.
and if you look at this, the DMV has nothing.
Mhm.
And we have, I know it's unarmed, but we have security up there. So,
Remember, yeah, you have unarmed security there.
right, yeah.
It
it's
is not
unarmed, but
like
it's
our
still-
neighbor to the north, Jefferson County uses, I will tell you, they use the same company. They have armed security at DSS, DMV, and public health. So, but they're set up quite differently. Our public health is within our hospital structure. Their public health is out on, another street. So unfortunately, it's the population people are dealing with now.
So what does?
So we're
everyone
going
else-
to table this till next month?
So what, does everyone else want to table it or? Okay.
I still
Yes,
have
then
to,
please.
I'm still going to have to make payments at the prevailing wage rate
Yeah, I
to
understand
the
that.
company. What more do you want from me by next month?
I think we really need to hear from what our other options are.
I would prefer not to do executive session today. Joan is not here. And we can only call executive session for very specific things. I don't think it rises to that at this point. When we have some more information, maybe the sheriff wants to be here, that I think we should have an executive session. So if we can get 30 days, get some options together, we'll do that and then we'll
to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so, yeah. Sure, perfect, thank you. So we do not have any resolutions or motions or executive session today. The informational items are attached for review. Is there anything else? If not, I will make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Vinny? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned.